Nobody expected how Bumpy Johnson would respond when he was insulted. In September 1948, Sal Bonanno walked into Bumpy's restaurant with 6 armed soldiers and said the one thing you never say to the Godfather of Harlem. The racial slur cracked through the room like a gunshot. Everyone expected Bumpy to erupt, to pull his razor, to turn the restaurant into a bloodbath. That was what S wanted an excuse for war. Instead, Bumpy did something that made S's blood turn cold. He smiled. Not a friendly smile, but the kind a man gives when he already knows how you are going to die and you don't. Then Bumpy slowly stood up, folded his napkin, placed it on the table, and spoke 6 words that would permanently alter the balance of organized crime in New York. What he said made Sal Bonanno leave Harlem that very night. What he said forced the 5 families into an emergency meeting. And what he said was not a threat, it was a promise. Harlem in 1948 was not the Harlem shown in movies. It was a kingdom, and Bumpy Johnson was its king. He didn't rule from a hidden office or underground bunker. He ruled from Wells Restaurant on 135th Street, a simple place with red leather boots, checkered tablecloths, and the smell of fried chicken and collard greens hanging in the air like incense. Everyone who mattered in Harlem passed through those doors: musicians, preachers, numbers, runners, politicians, even police. They came because Wells Restaurant was neutral territory. You could have problems with someone outside, but inside those walls, you respected the peace. Bumpy's peace. Bumpy Johnson controlled something the Italian mob, Irish gangs, and corrupt police all wanted: Harlem's numbers racket. The numbers game was simple. People wagered pennies, nickels, and dimes on 3-digit numbers. If your number hit, you won. If it didn't, the house kept the money. To the people of Harlem, it wasn't gambling, it was hope. A chance that this week you might win and finally buy your child's new shoes or pay the rent without begging the landlord. Bumpy didn't create the numbers game. A brilliant black woman named Stephanie St. Clair did. They called her Madame Queen. She ran Harlem's numbers operation in the 1920s and early 1930s until Dutch Schultz and the Italian mob tried to force their way in. They nearly destroyed her. In 1932, she went to Bumpy and told him, "Protect my operation, and I'll make you the most powerful man in Harlem." Bumpy kept his word. By 1948, he controlled the entire numbers operation in Harlem. Millions of dollars moved through his hands every year. The Italians despised it because in their world, black men didn't run empires, they worked for them. Frank Costello tried to negotiate, but Bumpy refused. Vito Genovese sent threats, and Bumpy ignored them. Joe Bonanno sent his nephew, S, the Butcher Bonanno, to settle the Harlem problem once and for all. That brings us to the insult that changed everything. September 19th, 1948. The night everything shifted. At 8:47 p.m., Wells Restaurant was full, 40 people, maybe more. The jukebox played Dizzy Gillespie's Manteca. Cigarette smoke drifted toward the ceiling like ghosts. Bumpy Johnson sat in his usual corner booth, positioned with a clear view of both entrances and the kitchen. His wife sat across from him, elegant and composed, the kind of woman who could quiet a room just by entering it. Bumpy was eating a ribeye steak, medium rare, cutting it with the same precision he applied to everything: methodical, controlled, no wasted movement. Then the door opened. S. Bonanno entered first, 6'2", 230 pounds of muscle in a tailored suit. They called him the Butcher because of what he did to a man in Brooklyn who tried to skim money from a Bonanno card game. They later found pieces of him in 4 different places. Behind S came his crew, 6 men, all armed. The bulges beneath their jackets were visible. They made no effort to conceal it. That was the point. The restaurant noticed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the jukebox seemed to grow quieter as if it sensed something bad was coming. S walked straight to Bumpy's table. He didn't ask permission. He didn't wait to be invited. He simply stepped up and stood there, staring down at Bumpy like he was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "Bumpy Johnson," said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "We need to talk." Bumpy didn't look up. He kept cutting his steaks, low, precise. The knife scraped softly against a porcelain plate. "I'm eating," Bumpy said quietly. He smiled, not a friendly smile, the kind of smile a bully gives you before taking your lunch money. "Yeah, I see that. Nice restaurant you got here. Real quaint. But here's the thing, Bumpy. My Uncle Joe has a problem. He thinks it's time for Harlem to get with the program. The numbers game, that's Italian business now. Always should have been." Bumpy still didn't look up, but his wife did. She stared at S with a cold contempt sharp enough to freeze blood. S continued, "So here's how this is going to work. You're going to step aside and hand over your operation. We'll give you a taste 10% for your trouble. You keep your little restaurant, play the big man for your people, but the real money stays with us, where it belongs." The entire restaurant held his breath. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Bumpy set down his knife, picked up his napkin, and dabbed the corners of his mouth. Then he looked up at S for the first time. His eyes were calm to calm. "That's a generous offer," Bumpy said evenly, "but I'm going to have to decline." S's smile vanished. "You're making a mistake." "I've made a lot of mistakes in my life," Bumpy replied. "This ain't one of them." That's when S said the word, the slur. The one thing you never say to a black man in his own establishment, in front of his wife, in front of his people. "Listen." Inward, the fork Bumpy's wife was holding struck her plate with a sharp clink. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The restaurant fell into absolute silence. Not the kind where people pause, but the kind where everyone wonders if they'll see tomorrow. Bumpy's expression didn't change. He didn't flinch. He didn't show anger. But everyone who knew him, everyone who understood what Bumpy Johnson was capable of, felt their blood turn cold. Because Bumpy Johnson, sitting perfectly still, was more dangerous than most men in motion. His right hand moved slowly into his vest pocket. As his 6 bodyguards tensed, hands drifting toward their weapons. But Bumpy didn't pull a gun. He pulled out his razor, the same straight razor he'd carried since he was 16. The one he used to carve his reputation into the flesh of men who underestimated him. He placed it gently on the table beside his steak knife. "You brought 6 men," Bumpy said quietly, his voice calm enough to be terrifying. "6 guns into my restaurant, and you think that makes you dangerous?" S tried to laugh. "I think it makes me smart." "No," Bumpy said. "It makes you ignorant." He stood up slowly, folded his napkin with the same precision he used to cut his steak, and placed it on the table. The 6 bodyguards reached for their weapons. Bumpy didn't even look at them. "You see these people?" Bumpy said, gesturing to the 40 people in a restaurant. "You think they're just customers? Just innocent folks eating dinner?" S looked around. For the first time, uncertainty entered his eyes. "Let me educate you," Bumpy continued. "That man by the door, his name's Thomas. I paid his daughter's hospital bills when she got pneumonia. That woman in the red dress, her husband, used to beat her. I made sure he stopped. That kid, washing dishes in the back, kept him out of jail when the cops tried to frame him for something he didn't do." Bumpy stepped closer. As his bodyguards raised their weapons halfway, but Bumpy didn't stop. "Every person in this restaurant owes me something. Not because I demanded it, because I earned it. You brought 6 guns into my house, yes, but I've got 40 soldiers. They're just not wearing suits." I swallowed hard and looked around the room again. The faces staring back at him weren't afraid. They were waiting for Bumpy's signal. "Now," Bumpy said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "I'm going to give you a choice. You can apologize to my wife for using that word in her presence. Then you can walk out of here and tell your Uncle Joe that Harlem is not for sale." Or Bumpy picked up the razor and opened it slowly. The blade caught the light. You can find out why they call this Bumpy's Kingdom. Sal Bonanno had killed 17 men in his life. He'd broken bones, burned businesses, extorted millions. He wasn't used to fear. But standing in that restaurant, surrounded by 40 silent witnesses, staring into Bumpy Johnson's calm, cold eyes, Sal Bonanno felt something he hadn't felt since childhood. Terror. Not the terror of physical pain, the terror that comes from realizing you've miscalculated badly and there's no way out. Bumpy smiled. The same smile as before, the one that said he already knew how this story ended. Then Bumpy Johnson spoke 6 words. 6 words that would echo through the criminal underworld for decades. "Your uncle will bury you tomorrow." The words hung in the air like smoke. S's face drained of color. "What? You heard me?" Bumpy said calmly. "You walked into my restaurant, disrespected me, disrespected my wife, disrespected my people, and you think you're walking out of here?" S's bodyguards raised their guns fully now. All 6 aimed at Bumpy. Bumpy didn't blink. "You can shoot me," Bumpy said. "Maybe you'll kill me. But the moment you pull those triggers, 40 people in this room will tear you apart. And even if you make it out, if you somehow fight your way through that door, you think you're leaving Harlem alive? This is my city, S. Every block, every corner, every alley. You're already dead. You just don't know it yet." The silence was absolute. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall, refrigerator humming in the kitchen, someone's breath coming fast and shallow. S's hand trembled. Just slightly, but it trembled. That's when Bumpy gave him mercy he didn't deserve. "Or," Bumpy said softly, "you can apologize to my wife, walk out of here, and never come back. Tell your uncle that if he wants Harlem, he can come himself, but he better bring more than 6 men." For 10 seconds, nobody moved. 10 seconds that felt like 10 years. Then Bonanno lowered his weapon. His crew stared at him in disbelief. But S wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Mrs. Johnson. Double quotes, "Mrs. Johnson," S said, his voice barely audible. I apologize." That word shouldn't have said it. She didn't respond. She only stared at him with cold, unforgiving eyes. Saul backed away slowly. His crew followed, weapons still out but lowered. They moved toward the door like men stepping away from a bomb they'd accidentally set off. At the door. So, turned back one last time. "This isn't over." Bumpy sat down, picked up his fork, and cut another piece of steak. "Yes, it is," Bumpy said without looking up. "You just don't know it yet." And his crew left. The door swung shut behind them. For a moment, the restaurant stayed silent. Then, someone began to clap slowly at first, then faster. Soon, everyone was clapping, standing, cheering. Bumpy Johnson had just faced down 6 armed mobsters without firing a single shot. His wife reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You didn't have to do that," she said, softly. "Yes, I did," Bumpy replied. "Respect is everything. You lose that, you lose everything." Sal Bonanno left Harlem that night. He never returned. 3 days later, the 5 families called an emergency meeting in Manhattan. Joe Bonanno wanted revenge. He wanted Harlem. He wanted Bumpy Johnson dead. But Frank Costello, the man who truly ran New York's underworlds, said something that changed everything. "Bumpy Johnson runs Harlem because Harlem wants him to. If we try to take it by force, we start a war we can't win. Not because we can't kill him, but because we can't kill 40,000 people who would die for him. Leave Harlem alone." And they did. From that night on, the Italian mob never again tried to take control of Harlem's numbers game. They made deals. They negotiated. They showed respect, because Bumpy Johnson reminded them of something they had forgotten. Power isn't just guns and money. It's loyalty. It's earning the respect of people who don't have to give it to you. Bonanno died in 1952, a heart attack. Some said it was natural. Others said Bumpy had a long memory. No one knows for sure, but this much is certain. After that night, in September 1948, no one ever disrespected Bumpy Johnson in his own restaurant again. In the razor he placed on the table, he never had to use it, because sometimes the most dangerous weapon a man has isn't made of steel. It's the love of his people. If this story of respect, power, and standing your ground moved you, hit the like button and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear about real strength, the kind that doesn't need violence to prove itself. Drop a comment below. Have you ever seen someone command a room with just their presence? Hit that notification bell for more untold stories about the legends who built Harlem with blood, sweat, and unbreakable resolve.